Hi, I'm Adam Zonder, the production manager for the Hangar Theater Company, and welcome to an episode of In Good Spirits. As we have gone virtual for the 2020 summer season and everyone is working from home, I'm currently sitting in an empty theater, which is odd considering it's the middle of the summer. However, between the ongoing pandemic and this being my 25th season with the Hangar, we thought having some conversations with various designers and technicians with whom I have worked over the years would be fun and in good spirits. I'd like to take a moment to give a big thank you to our series sponsor, Meyer Farm Distillers, located in Ovid, New York. Joe and his team produce various award-winning vodkas, gins, and my personal favorite, bourbons. Please check them out at meyerfarmdistillers.com. Today's conversation is with longtime friend and properties supervisor extraordinaire, Kathy Fabian. How are you today?
Good, thanks, Adam. How are you? I'll call you Zonder because that's how we called each other going back. You call me Fabian, I'll call you Zonder.
Absolutely, because when I wrote that out of Kathy Fabian, I'm like, I can't call her Kathy. I just can't do it. So for the audience, can you briefly describe what it is that you do?
Yeah. So a prop supervisor is someone who works closely with the design team, the director, the rehearsal process to procure and create all of the 3D objects that aren't scenery basically on stage. So it is a combination of interpreting a script, to understand the characters, to know what kind of things might be in their world, in their lives. And then you also need to make sure that things like furnishings and things that we call hand props, which are anything that's picked up, are actually safe and theatrically ready to do the job that they need to do on stage. So it is a little bit of everything. It take the set designer's work and you really try to read into it so that you can be a top layer on their vision. It's a lot of understanding all of the departments in order to create and furnish everything from large moving objects to tiny things that are eaten on stage, special effects. Sometimes hand props can include things that are actually a crossover with the costume department, like canes or character props, eyeglasses. It depends. So it's definitely a design and technical based job. And I will say it is never boring.
So basically, it's the majority of the things that the actors touch, stand on, or sit on.
Yes.
Great.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you decide that props was what you wanted to do?
Wow. I don't think I ever really decided that this is what I was going to do. And funny enough, I think literally my first prop job was the Hangar Theater 1995 season. Because your production manager at the time, Steve Spoonamore, knew me from the theater world in Vermont and in other places. I had, at the time, been living in Chicago. And I'd done a lot of different things in the theater: scenic painting, scenic building, acting, voiceover. I studied theater at University of Vermont. I had a BA in theater arts. So I knew I wanted to do theater, but I didn't really know much about props. And because I guess, I wasn't really thinking straight, I took the job at the Hangar, literally walked into my first show as was to Prop Sweeney Todd, which is, any props person will tell you it isn't the easiest job in the world. But because I think I liked to do a little of everything, building, painting, research. I was very interested in furniture history and the design aspect of theater, and getting to read plays that put you in a completely different world or time period. I think that the challenge of props really appealed to my need to kind of change directions a lot. it's definitely a field for a multitasker. So I was bitten by the bug at the hangar. But then I said to myself after one season of, living in this idyllic world of Ithaca, where every board member has a barn full of things that they just want to give you. And, you can just drive over there and fill up the back of your van and come back. And everyone in town was so friendly and supportive of the theater. It was amazing. But definitely after my second season, summer season with the hangar, a lot of New York designers started to say, hey, are you moving to the city? We'd love you to work on this project. And I just thought to myself, how would anyone possibly do this job in Manhattan? Where getting something from point A to point B without getting a parking ticket, affordably, or even finding these kinds of vintage things that you could possibly afford in or around the city, because they're, as a entry level props person, it's not as if you get a big budget. So
right.
I was terrified. I just thought, no, I will never do props anywhere but the Hangar Theater. And of course that changed. But really, I think those 2 summers at the hangar were my introduction to what props was and what the job required, and also really inspired me to kind of solve this thing that seemed unsolvable. It really is challenging. And so because the hangar had this echelon of wonderful designers and directors and actors, I mean, you actually couldn't fail. So I spent a lot of all-nighters and, a lot of time running around and sitting on my computer late at night trying to figure out what to do or calling around. So I loved the challenge. I guess that's where I was bitten.
That's great.
Yeah.
So props is a lot of, a good mix rather of both research and like craft. Mm-hmm. So had you always been a crafty person?
Yes, absolutely. I always was doing things with my hands since I was little. Both my grandparents, my grandmothers, in fact, taught me many different crafts when I was little, which is very good for an overactive imagination as a child. Kept me out of a lot of trouble. I mean, they taught me a lot of things. I was interested in painting. I studied art history at University of Vermont. I was really interested in furniture history in particular, which antiquing and all of that seemed to be a part of the props field, and it really interested me to understand, to find out when the play takes place, and then work backwards to figuring out what everything looked like and what they had and what they didn't have at that time, and how daily life was achieved and what objects you touched during a day because you had to, and what didn't they have that added so much work to the day or to the time. I have to say that reading a lot of novels in school, where things are described in generally, I think with a play, if you're reading a novel that's in that time period and then you're reading a play in that time period, a play, you actually have to physicalize what it is. Everything from, I remember teaching actors at the new school how to spin wool on a spinning wheel. I mean, I didn't know that like 2 days before I had to teach them. So these are the kind of things you get to learn. So I think the historical part is very interesting to me for sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your first season was 1995, which is actually the year before I started. So the first year you and I worked together was 1996, where we did The Diary of Anne Frank, I Hate Hamlet, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, Camelot, Angels in America, which you were also in.
Don't remind me.
And Fences. So,
25 years ago.
so do you have any recollections of those shows prop wise?
Oh, yes, I do. That was my second season. They were the hangar doesn't do easy plays to prop, that's for sure. A lot of really challenging and diverse settings. Which one? Beowulf did I Hate Hamlet or?
And Rosencrantz Guildenstern, they ran in rotating rep.
Right. Trying to find medieval things in Ithaca wasn't as easy as I thought it was. I was in that hangar shop morning till late at night, sometimes through the night. It was as if, you'd go out during the day feeling you were going to get lucky antiquing. It's not like it is today where everything's at your fingertips. There's eBay, there's Etsy, and you can sort of sit at your desk for hours and almost populate an entire vintage production. This was a mixture of planning how to get out during the day in a vehicle, go around, talk to this guy who's going to refer you to this guy, who's going to refer you to this guy. And once you get to a certain point where you realize that object doesn't exist in town, then you have to figure out how to build it. Or you call around to other theaters in the country and see if they have something such as that they can rent for you. So, yeah, that was a heavy period show season with no end to the amount of stuff that I had to pull out of a hat. So, I think there were things like moldings and details in the architecture that Beowulf wanted to achieve. And when we couldn't afford to just buy them pre-made, we were literally sitting in the parking lot carving them out of foam. It was amazing. Like he's a genius. So just getting to watch him do that was great. Mm-hmm. There is a famous story of me giving up hope on a suit of armor that no one
of my favorite stories
have to rent. And so after days and days of thinking I would never find this exact suit of armor that was needed for this play, I went to go buy myself a bottle of wine and cry in my little dorm room. And when I walked into the wine store, there was a suit of armor holding a sign talking about sale wines. And so I slowly backed out of the store to think about my strategy. And I walked back in and basically just said, "Can I have that?" And after a series of meetings, they did let me just borrow it. So that was a very lucky prop find. I mean, talk about getting lucky. That suit of armor was in the play, and it was very funny. And then it was returned to the wine store after the play closed, with his little sign about next month's sale wine. So that was really great. But Angels in America, that is a heavy prop show as well. And the beloved Bob Moss needed someone to do the voiceover for the angel at the end of the show, who has this cavernous sort of presence, and he liked my voice. So I did the look up like 10 million times in the microphone, and finally they were like, well, you should, we need someone small to fly in as the angel at the end of the show. And long story short, as nuts as that sounds, and I'm not talking about high-tech rigging, I'm talking about a rope and a pulley and a ladder. Mm-hmm. Every day at approximately, I think it was 7:40, they would come to the shop. I'd be covered with sawdust. I would be hosed down and then slammed into a dress that was literally 10 feet beyond the length of my feet. I would have to hold the dress up, shimmy up a ladder, and Steve Spoonemore, who was the production tech at the time, would hold on to me until it was time to fly in over the audience. and do the bit. So I would fly right behind where I can see your head is right now,
Yep.
all the way to the top of the theater, over the audience, and back down and turn one more time and kind of land over the bed. It was thrilling. I really didn't know what was happening. The set designer, I think it was Richard Dennis at the time, could not stop laughing every time I came out over the audience. But apparently, it was quite frightening to most people. And it was, I think Bob liked my performance, if you could call it that. One night, as we had some lovely young people who were interns working the ropes, as I'll say, I would get over the bed and sort of hang there and then be slowly let in and land on the bed, at which point two of the men who were the lead characters would walk me down. And one night, I think something got jammed in the works backstage, and the pulley was not letting me into all the way to the bed. There was about probably 7 inches left. And I don't know if you've ever done harness flying, but you really need to have a strong stomach, because in order to stay straight, you have to really work against the harness because it wants you to be prone. So I was this way, and I knew I only had a minute or two before I was lowered to the bed. Well, I wasn't lowered all the way. So I began to spin, and my little legs were going like this, and everyone was kind of laughing and looking in terror at me. And finally, the two of the guys like held onto my feet so I wouldn't swing. The set designer never really got over that. He thought it was the funniest thing he's ever seen. It was terrifying, but I will remember that forever.
Yes, because I'll remember going in the next morning and fixing it.
Oh, it was fun. Yeah. I'm sure you do.
Yes. So after those seasons, you did finally move to New York and started working in New York. And soon after that is when you created your company, PropStar.
Great. Well, I did a lot of shows after I gave up fighting the prop thing. I was waiting tables. I was managing a small designer furniture shop and building furniture with this guy and learning finish treatments, which I really loved. And taking a show here and there, until I sort of built up quite a big repertoire of off-Broadway shows. I was doing summer stock at the Bay Street Theater. I did the Big Apple Circus. I built the props for them for 2 seasons. That would be 7 hours of stories, I'll tell you that. But it was really challenging and great. And so I realized that, just as I had suspected, doing props by yourself in New York is very hard. So I started to build myself a small team of people and ask for an assistant on a show. And, pushing to get a little more money for the people rather than the stuff. So it was difficult and a slow road to building up a team. But my basic premise for PropStar was that props should be achieving and procuring a props package in a really good, safe, and professional way should be a team effort. And so that's how I built my company. And slowly people started to understand how much better the work could be, and less stressful and less frantic, and not have another burnt out props person working on their own. So it caught on until finally I was sort of sharing space at the furniture shop with the friend of mine who was working on the furniture. And then I took over my own space. So I had a small studio with a little workshop. In 2003, I did Golda's Balcony, which was my first Broadway show with Anna Luizos and Scott Schwartz. It was a really great show. Tova Felch was amazing. And there weren't a lot of people not in the union that were doing props, so I was kind of considered the outside shopper, which was great. But slowly, my resume started to build up, and 80 shows later, I have my company, which moved from Brooklyn. We were in Williamsburg. We moved to the Manhattan to Hell's Kitchen, which is right near the theater, through a series of lucky events. And then now I am in the United Scenic Artists and also in ACT. So I am able to work in the theater alongside with the crew, also with the design team. So yeah, it's been pretty great. And a lot of the designers that I first worked with at the hangar are still people that I'm working with now. So
that's great. So when you're propping, when you and your company are propping a Broadway show, who is, suggesting you, or who is recruiting you? Is it the designer? Is it the producers?
Normally for me, my opportunities normally lie with the set designer. But there are definitely directors that ask for me. You need to really have a great relationship with general management because they do the hard work of trying to make all of the budgets fit together and understanding everyone's time. So, but in general, set designers and I tend to form a bond. And so if they like my work, they recommend me for their next show and their next show and their next show. I've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of amazing designers that way. So
roughly how many shows at a time are you juggling typically?
It's for my company, a great year is having 2 big musicals in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And then you dabble in as much as you can in between. We like to do off-Broadway and lower budget things whenever we can, because I like to sort of Robin Hood what we've learned to those companies. Often there's a limit to what we can afford to do, being that my overhead is somewhat tricky. So we're always in the middle of one rehearsal process and sort of talking about the next show. The only thing we can't really do so well after a certain point is layer up tech rehearsals, because once I'm in the theater, it's difficult for me to be also paying attention to a rehearsal at another place. So that is one of the hardest things, actually, as a freelance props contractor. You really need to watch those calendars really closely to make sure you're not backing yourself into a corner you can't get out of. Although I have, a team of several really great associate coordinators. My right hand, John, who's been with me for a long time. I mean, I can put him in a tech if I have to run and put out a fire somewhere else. So, for example, I was doing China Doll in one theater on 45th Street while I was also doing Fiddler on the Roof at the Broadway. And I remember sprinting through Schubert Alley many nights to get from one to the other. But, as many as you can do. But I do not like to overbook myself, because I like to give the same attention to all projects, no matter what their means is or their schedule is,
Great. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the bigger differences other than budget are between propping a show on Broadway or at a regional theater like the Hangar?
Sure. I feel like people think that the process for commercial theater is so much more glamorous. It is not. It is every man for himself. And imagine you are managing the producer's budget for you. That could be $50,000, maybe it's $200,000 for a huge high-scale musical just for props, and you have 6 weeks to spend that money the right way and get everything on stage safely and in the building, that's a lot of pressure. And although it seems when you come from a summer stock to the budget of a Broadway show that, oh, this is going to just take care of itself, it's not. It's really just as much work, you know, and the environment is, I won't say cutthroat because we're all friends, but it's do or die. The deadlines are real. There's no saying, oh, let's go home tonight, we'll finish it tomorrow, because every minute is money. So I feel like the group of people that I did summer stock with at the Hangar and at Bay Street, those people that end up wanting to take part in theater communities like those are the best people to work with on Broadway, because they understand the limitations of the budget and the time. And so it's just like the same friendly group, but on a different scale. It is so much fun to be somewhere like the Hangar. I mean, you're living there. It's like being at college all over again. So even if I spent 9 years at Bay Street because I was so addicted to how wonderful it was to be able to do your craft in a place that's also so beautiful. And, you know, everyone is living together and we get to talk about the work while we're out having a drink. I mean, you still do that on Broadway. It's just like, I got to get home and get my 4 hours of sleep before tomorrow's tech starts, because it's just a lot more pressure, you know? And you have to learn really fast. Knowing how to price things is really important, because you learn very quickly if you are creating your own budget and you underestimate or overestimate something. It's you know, it could be a very big loss for you. So I think like summer stock and things, community theaters, off Broadway, they usually say to me what their budget is, and I need to make it work for that or say no.
Right.
But with Broadway, I'm creating my own budget for this huge project of things I don't know how to do yet. And then once I sign off on it, it's do or die. So I'm a lot more self-reliant. Like it's not like I don't talk to the production team. It's just that I have to know what I'm talking about before I get to the production meeting.
So with propping a Broadway show, since it's producers who are putting the show on, not like a theater company, so are the producers and the show renting the props from you, or do they own them?
It depends. There's many different kinds of arrangements that we can make. Some shows that want to keep their items and know that they're gonna do tours later or want to move on and have another life will want to purchase the package. Some shows want to do an out-of-town tryout and rent everything so they're not saddled with it later on. Some shows that are going to have a very short run because, for example, maybe there are big movie stars in the show and it's a sold limited engagement. It's probably more cost effective for them to rent the package. And so also, on that note, there's growing concern with waste and keeping things green. So no one wants to buy all of these things and then have to send them to the landfill afterwards. So there's often a negotiation. Do we want to store these things? Is it better for me to rent it to you and then I own it and store it with me in case it wants to go out? So there are many different agreements you can do. But in general, a musical that wants to run or an open-ended show is more looking to buy and own a package than a show that has a limited engagement or is running in rep or something like that.
So does that mean that you somewhere have a ginormous warehouse full of stuff?
Leftovers, yes. I have things I have acquired over the years that I have bought to rent to other shows, or that people were going to throw them out. And the battling storage in the Manhattan area is, of course, difficult. We do have 2 rooms of small hand props from all eras in my 52nd Street building in Hell's Kitchen. And those things are great because it saves a lot of time and money for rehearsal packages. You know, I have a box full of tubs from all phones, a tub full of phones from all eras, or, you know, little things like games and typewriters and toys and handheld sports equipment and books and anything you might use to outfit a rehearsal that isn't super specific. We've also started a really easy and accessible rental policy for all the small theaters in town that can come and just rent anything they want for $10 for the first month and $5 every month after that. So places like, you know,
You really have come from small theater and understand.
Yeah. So we didn't want to start tagging everything and valuing it. So we group things like if it's glassware, it's like 6 glasses, $10 for the first month, $5 every month after that. And that works out really well because people come and they can take their own items, pick their own items, pack them up themselves and bring them back. So yeah, I like to keep things moving, but I also don't like to see things go in the landfill. So
that's great.
Yeah.
So I've shown it to people that you were featured in an American Theater Wing video in their working in the theater series. And within the video, you talked about the House of Cards from The Real Thing.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just talk about that one a little bit and making a house of cards fall down on cue every night?
That was really a lot of pressure. Being that the entire team had said it had never been done properly before. And we sat in my little conference room, myself, 2 of my associates, my carpenter, and sometimes a guest, building houses of cards for weeks on end. Because I would have to convince the actors that this was going to work. So every week I'd need to show up at rehearsal and have made some progress. Oh, how's this going to happen? And, you know, we used magnets and glue and tape and different kinds of, we talked about electromagnets and we talked about air current, and we read all of these things about physics and support structures, and we looked at architectural research about how the weight of each card would hold up. And in the long run, the show was done, the trick was done with a piece of string. So it just goes to show you, one trick line, one stagehand, pulling one card. Of course, they were sewn together and connected, but yeah, that was, I don't think I slept a wink for probably 4.5 weeks. And during tech, when 1 out of the 5 times you ran it wouldn't work and there would be some troubleshooting, it was like the whole world was going to end. So I was so happy when that show opened, and reading the performance reports every night just to make sure the House of Cards was falling on cue. Very stressful, very stressful. But we love doing those special effects here because of that challenge. Like, there's got to be a way of figuring it out, you know? We've done a few funny effects for TV shows like Samantha Bee and Fosse Verdon, where, you know, when TV is writing, it's just like you get your request on a Thursday and it's due on a Monday or Tuesday. So you have to like stay and figure it out until it's figured out, make sure you have all your materials and then quickly do it, which is a great workout for us. It makes some of the theater things like the House of Cards seem like, we have 3 weeks, you know?
Other than the time you just mentioned, what are some of the big differences propping theater versus television or film?
Well, I haven't done a lot of TV things yet. Mostly the things I've done for TV have been those quick turnaround, elaborate things that the in-house, props team is just too busy to handle with all of the other things they're trying to turn around in 4 or 5 days. But Fosse Verdon, that show, it was about the theater. So I think they got a lot of input from people who do theater frequently. So I was actually creating some sort of scenic elements and decor from various shows from the Fosse Verdon time period. So it was similar to what I would do for a musical, honestly. There aren't too many differences when you are creating or trying to procure a list really quickly, but you do have to remember certain concerns for on camera with TV that you won't for stage. They're just like a different set of technical things. Like for Chaplin, we were doing a recorded film piece for Chaplin when I did it on Broadway. And there were a whole series of champagne toasts. And what you don't remember is that on a green screen, you can't really have a clear glass. So, because it doesn't show up. So I was out in the alley frosting all of the champagne glasses for things. I learned a lot that day. Going from translating all the props from the theater stage to the filming that day, we had to tech them to suit the needs,
Right. So other than something like the House of Cards that we talked about, what are some of the other big projects or props that you've had to deal with that, really stretched what you were able to do?
God. Seems like there's always one item in every show that's really difficult. So China Doll, which was Mamet. I work with David Mamet a lot. He often has some very challenging things, especially in the world of, violence and destruction, fight choreography. China Doll had an airplane, a model airplane, and Al Pacino needed to beat someone to death with it at the end of the show.
My God.
The model airplane is made out of various metals, if not resins, and it's very heavy. And this model airplane had to be beautiful, viewable close up, every detail imaginable. That was probably the hardest prop I've ever had to come up with for a fairly short rehearsal period and a very short tech period. It was a series of molding and casting and begging and borrowing and stealing and talking to the people who really build these model airplanes. I probably have hundreds of parts of airplanes floating around here in the shop. Those special effects are the kinds of things that you just know. There's no one sitting around that knows how to do it, so you have to figure it out. And sometimes it's the hard way, and sometimes you have a kind of a crazy idea and it happens to work. So I think that airplane almost killed me, but we did it.
Good. I'm glad. So based on the based on the current times of the pandemic, do you have an opinion about where theater might be heading in the future?
Well, what I have said I've gotten the opportunity to do a few Zoom classes for some of my friends that are teaching currently, which I love to do. So I talked to the second year design students at Yale. They're set designers. And I talked to the technical theater department at SUNY Plattsburgh, a very small class. In fact, they would love to talk to you, Adam Zonder.
Sure.
And, right now it seems like, well, how the hell is anyone going to get a bunch of people into a theater? It's silly to talk about it until there's a vaccine. Well, there's going to have to be a vaccine, I think.
Mhm.
I don't care to gamble and roll the dice on when that is. It could be March, it could be September, it could be January of 2022. But what I have told students is that, storytelling is never going away. Live storytelling, I mean, there's nothing more necessary for passing on history than that. So we have to figure it out.
Yep.
I'm not so technically savvy in terms of all of the ways of digitally marketing myself and redoing my business from the internet. I certainly can work on things like contactless rentals, chosen for your play by Kathy Fabian. But in terms of figuring out how to tell live stories in a theater, I think we all need to keep an open mind and just slowly get back, but I do not think it's going away.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think, Zonder?
I agree. I think that, theater's not going anywhere. It might be a little bit before we can, have humans in the room again.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're heading anywhere forever and ever. So, well, thank you very much. I'd like to once again thank our sponsor, Meyer Farm Distillers. Thank you very much, Fabian.
You're welcome. I hope to talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.